birds are back. The hardy-daws are here and they're not going anywhere soon. And so you often hear some sneezing as well. That is my dogs sneezing around me. Okay, so welcome everyone to STEM Lockdown Digital School. And thank you to Africa Teen Gigs that has made this possible for all of us. So we are still in the grade 12 IT lesson. The lesson will be same time, same place, same link every day for the rest of this week. The links might change for next week, so keep an eye on all the social media platforms for those. So we are still busy with two-dimensional arrays. And we're going to see how far we get today. Depends on all your questions. But from two-dimensional arrays, we're going to delete rows and columns, and we're going to insert rows and columns. And then possibly we'll get to the sorting as well. So let's get started. I'm going to show my other screen to you guys just now. I just need to open it up. So here we go. Here is a visual representation of what a two-dimensional array looks like in your RAM. Remember, your arrays, whether one-dimensional or two-dimensional, only exist in the RAM. So any changes that you want to make permanently will have to be written to a text file and then read again. But let's have a look at this two-dimensional array. It has 6 rows, and then you have 10 columns. And this is the data that it contains. And what I want to do is I want to delete row 3. So in order to do that, I'm going to show you the code soon. But what we're going to do is we're going to start looping at the row that we want to delete. Then we are going to take the next row and take its values and place it over that row. So 733 will move now, well, not move, a copy of it will be placed over 3. So the first time your loop loops, starting at 3 and column being 1, this will be 733 and this will be 733. So then you'll loop, staying at row 3, we'll loop through all of these columns and place these values over that row there. Then we'll go to the next row, row 4, and that will be replaced by row 5, and row 6 by, and row 5 will be replaced by row 6. So if you had more, obviously it will continue until you reach the end. So if we are going to, just going back to our previous lesson, if we are going to delete a row, which for loop should we start with, the row or the column one? You guys answer in your chats. For those who are new, there's a chat option. You can, yes, Mason, it's the row question. So if we have a for loop for the row, if the question is asking us a row question, we start with the for loop for the row. So here's the code to achieve that. Okay, so I want to move the learner in row 3. Now, this is using hard code 3, but before this line of code, you could have asked the user maybe for input, which row do you want to delete? Or you could also ask, enter the name of the person that you want to delete. So before this could be a while loop searching through your array and trying to find the person in an if statement that the user entered. But this part here is now assuming I have the value of the row that I want to delete. So as you guys said, we'll start with a for loop for the row, and I'm starting at the row that I want to delete because row 1 and 2 stays the same. Nothing's changing there. But to the user, it looks like we're deleting, but we're actually just replacing. And then I'm going to go to I count R, very important, -1. I'll explain that now. Now, this here is actually how you delete something from a one-dimensional array, which you guys should also be able to do. So what I'm doing here is, let's say our row is 3. I'm replacing 3 with a name that is stored in 4. So 3 plus 1. Okay, so this here is the reason why I need to go to -1. Let's say my array was declared with 20 rows. So an array from 1 to 20. If I filled that array completely and I count R was 20 and I try to put 21 into 20, I get that error message that you guys said, the access violation. Because I'm trying to go to row 21 and put it into row 20, but row 21 wasn't declared. And an access violation means you're trying to access something in your RAM that doesn't actually exist. So therefore, we need to loop up to iCountR -1. So if we take our example of an array with 20 rows, this last time this loop will execute will be when I row is 19. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting 20 over 19. Okay, but now still inside, so this is just the one-dimensional array where I removed the name. Remember, this was parallel to our array mark. So what I'm doing now is I am looping through the columns, and I want to replace my two-dimensional arrays, the row, let's start again at row 3, with the marks that are in row 4. Keeping the columns the same, the terms stay the same. So term 1 stays in term 1, term 2 stays in term 2. So you'll see iCol just stays the same because I am changing or I'm removing a row. So the indexes here are very similar, except now that array mark has 2 indexes, row first and then column. And I'm placing row 4 over row 3 for column 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it loops again and the row changes to 4. And so I continue. So once I am done with this code here, I'll come back to this just now. This is actually what it looked like. So if I had an array where I wanted to replace row 3, by the end of this loop, of the bit I explained to you guys just now, if I had only 6 rows filled, these 2 last rows, row 5 and 6, will now be the same value. We went up to iCountR, in this case 5, -1, and then we took 6 and placed it over that. Now, if I have my decrease of my iCountR, so in this instance, it used to be 6, but now I'm changing it to 5. And I have something like a display procedure that uses iCountR to display and to do calculations. I won't include this line here. It will only go up to there because I've decreased my row counter because I have 1 row less. But a question in the question paper, they could possibly ask you to clear that last row. So in that instance, if it's needed to clear that row, you need to, for string arrays, whether 2-dimensional or 1-dimensional, you assign the last one, iCountR, to an empty string. And then for numbers, it depends on the question, but possibly set them all to 0. It's not possible to assign an empty string here. You'll get a syntax error because you can't put a string into an integer. So this is only done if you are asked to do that. But this decrease the counter, you always have to do because you now have 1 less row. And by decreasing this counter, all your procedures, all your calculations using iCountR will now be correct because it won't go up to 6 in this instance. It will now only go up to 5. So this is code that, again, there's lots of code in Delphi that you can study. So this is code that you actually can study to learn how to delete a row. Okay, so You guys are welcome to ask questions on the chat as we go along. I'm just going to move over to deleting a column. So here is an example of deleting a column. Again, we will start at the column we want to delete. Let's say we wanted to delete column 6, and we are going to take column 7 and place it over column 6. 8 over 7, 9 over 8, and 10 over 9. So the rows here, remember, stay the same. So let's say I take the column 7 in row 1, 986. I'm going to put it in column 6, but the row stays the same. It's only the column that I'm deleting. So again, this code, since we are, I guess you guys have it now, since we are deleting a column, we are going to start with the for loop for the column. So I want to delete column 6. Again, above this line, there could be ways of getting column 6, input from the user, or a search that needs to be done for a column, or even saying delete column 6, as simple as that, and then the code will look exactly like this. So since we're deleting a column, we're starting at column 6. And in this instance, I've used a column counter. The previous programs we did, we said we had 4 terms, and that was a fixed number. So if this is a fixed number, so you know there are 4 terms and you don't need to keep track of how many columns there are, you could say loop from, okay, this one has 10. So let's say it was hard code 10. We knew it was always 10. We go from 6 to 9. But in this instance, I just use an example of using a column counter, because what they sometimes do in the exam papers is they set a column counter value, or a row counter for that matter. So when you start a program, always push F12 and have a look at what is declared. And if values are assigned to variables, like you can actually assign I count C in a declaration to 10. So you could say I count C is equal to 10. That will usually be done up at the top under the declaration of your form. Also, the arrays that is given are often done up there, or also under private. It just depends on what type of array it is and how that array will get values. So always have a look to see what the requirements are there. So here we're looping from I count C to -1 to prevent that crashing. And remember now, we're not deleting a person. So if this was deleting from my array mark with a name, the parallel one-dimensional array, I wouldn't include deleting the person, because the person still stays there. It's just the one term mark is falling away. So here I'm looping through my entire rows. So from 1 to I count R, and for each person, I'm replacing the current column. So let's say column 6 is where it will start. I'm replacing that column with the value in column 7. Then my inner loop, remember, executes completely from 1 to I count R before I change over to my for loop for the column. So this row here will now loop from 1 to the end of all my rows and replace each person's mark. So then it will go to 2 and replace their mark in column 6 with their mark in column 7. So once it's gone through the entire row, through all the rows for column 6, then my column counter changes to 7, and I replace all the rows with a value in column 8. I replace the columns in 7 with the values that sits in 8. So at the end of this loop here, again, your 2-dimensional array in your RAM will look like this. So let's say I had 10 columns. The last 2 columns will look the same, because 9 was replaced with 10. So now these 2 are the same, and the same rules go for the previous question. I will decrease my counter if I have one, so that it's no longer 10 anymore, it's now 9. So wherever I'm displaying columns, this here is where my loops will stop for my columns. It will no longer show 10. But the question could ask you to replace these values. Either, let's say it was in this case, it's an integer. So I will loop through all the rows, but staying on column C, and I'll replace them all with 0. If array mark was a string, you would possibly replace them all with an empty string. So that is deleting from rows and columns. So it's actually not that difficult. Okay, so the next few, there are several ways to insert. The easiest way they could ask you is by saying to you, insert a new item at the end of your arrays. So not at a certain position. We'll do the certain position soon. So let's take an array mark declared as with 20 rows and 5 columns of integer data type. Now we want to add a new learner, and learners are added per row. So we need to add an extra row at the end. And this here needs to be done for all inserts. I haven't included it in all the example because it's very simple code, but this is again preventing that access violation. What I'm really doing here before I start adding a new learner is I'm first testing if my array is full. So you see I've highlighted the 20 there for you. If iCountR is already 20, I can't add another learner to this class. I can't add another item to my array because 21 will give me an access violation. So in this instance, I just have an if statement checking if my array is full. And if it is, I display a message and exit this procedure. Remember this begin and end when you're using an exit. And just a reminder again that you can't use an exit in any loop. So no exit in a loop, but an exit is allowed in if statements. Okay, so now I have, after this code, I've determined that there is space for the new learner. And what I'm doing now is I'm incrementing my counter. So now let's say I was at iCountR was equal to 19. So now I'm incrementing my iCountR to 20, and I'm adding a new name and marks in that row because we're adding a new row. So for row 20 and column 1, 2, 3, 4, I am adding new values. And this here is dependent on your question. So I have several different examples of how we could get values, but you could really go back to that first lesson we had on arrays and how to populate arrays. But one option would be to get input from the user for an input box and maybe hard code for 1, 2, 3, 4. They say to you in the question paper, mark 1 for this person is 18, 2 is 82, 3 is 83, 4 is 87. And then you have, this will be the code for that. You could then also be asked to add random values. Then you could use a loop. You could get input from an edit box for the name, but you can't get input from an edit box when you're looping. Okay, so quickly you guys tell me the wording in the paper. If I know I have to use an input box for input by the user, what is the word we're looking for to know that the question's requiring us to use an input box? What will the question say? I'm sure you guys, we did this last week. It doesn't actually say message. It says not a message dialog box. It's going to say make use of a dialog box. So message dialog box is that message box that we did in SQL last week, where it had the yes and no buttons. So the question is going to say make use of a dialog box, and then you need to know it's an input box if it's input from the user. Now, if it says make use of a dialog box, what is the simplest way to display a message using a dialog box? What what will you use? So displaying a message using a dialog box is the question. So what is the simplest method? The message dialog box is show message. Yes, Khosi. Because the message dialog box is just way too complex to code and it's just wasting our time. So displaying a message, that's simple. Just use a show message like this one here. Just don't leave this empty or write rubbish. Just write something sensible, but it does not need to be very long. Okay, so that's input for us. And this is very simple. Now the person has been added to the end of my array. Just remember, this change, this new person is only now in the RAM. If you would run this person added, you'll see it if you click your display button. But when you stop your program and you run it again, that person will no longer be there. So you guys tell me, what do we need to do to make that change permanent so that the next time that I run my program, this new person will be in there? Because our two-dimensional, well, any array only exists in the RAM of our computers. So what will we need to add this person permanently so the next time that I run it, I will see this new person added to my two-dimensional array? I'm waiting. Does no one know? Yes, write it to a text file, iPhone 11. We have to write it to a text file, and only in that way do we make the changes permanent. So that often confuses learners because they think they didn't do it, but they actually did. Okay, so now this is a more complex one. They could also ask you to add a new learner in a specific row. Now, you can tag this code and study it because the same code, you can use the same code in one-dimensional arrays where it could also be asked. So both the previous example and this example could be applied to one-dimensional arrays. Okay, now important is we want to this time start at the end and loop down to, in other words, backwards, down to the row where I want to insert the new person in my arrays. This is really to create, this first part here is creating space for the person in row 4. I want to show you guys first what will happen. So once I'm done with my execution, what I've done is I'm starting way at the bottom and I'm moving everyone one row down. So everyone goes one row down. And then if I wanted to insert a new person in row 4, then once I'm done with that loop, row 4 and 5 will have the same value because I'm taking Layla's values and putting them in the next row and also her marks. Now remember, our columns are going to stay the same. Okay, this is a row question. We'll start with a row for loop, and this is what we'll do. Okay, so we start at the end. So let's say, obviously, before this code, as I said previously, you need to test if there's space for this new person. Is I count R equal to 20? You know, is there still space to add someone else you're going to exit? So what you're doing here is, let's say I am at position 19. So I have filled my array up to 19 rows. I now loop down to 4. I'm now placing in row 20 the person's name who is in row 19. Then I loop through all my columns, 1 to 4, 1 to I count C, whatever code you're going to use there, depending on the question. And I'm moving this same person's marks to row 20. So our row is 19. I'm putting in row 20 in columns 1, 2, 3, 4, the values of the row 19, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the columns. So my columns are staying the same, but I'm taking the previous row or the row I'm currently in, which is row 90, and I'm putting all their values in the next row. And that's how you achieve the output below this is now me. I just displayed the output here after this code ran, just so that you guys can see your two-dimensional array is going to look like. So what you've done now is you've created space in row 4 for the new person, and all that is left now is to overwrite this row with the new person's values. Okay, so input from the person, maybe from an edit box. And this is an example of inserting the new person at row 4. This could be a variable as well. Maybe the person entered a number for you. I want to insert a new person at row whatever. And this could be replaced with that variable from the input from the user. And then they need, I'm only looping through the marks. I'm only looping through the column. I'm staying at row 4 because it's only row 4 that needs new values. And now I'm looping from 1 to 4, and each new column then gets a mark, and I'm using an input box. Remember, when we are looping, whether it's two-dimensional arrays or anything else in Delphi, when I'm looping and I need input from the user, it needs to be in an input box because they don't have the opportunity to change your edit box while your loop is executing. Okay, so here I'm looping through all my columns and I'm in array mark 4 and looping from 1 to 4, getting new marks. You can also, remember, in your input box, include something like the column number. That also helps you when you're testing your program, that you can see which mark you are busy with. I'm busy with column 1 or term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4. So that is to make it a little bit user friendly, but only do that, something like that, if the question's asking you to do that in the paper. Okay, so let's move on. And this is now adding a column. Same code. So it's actually getting very monotonous what I'm showing you, because all we're doing is we are just swapping loops around depending on the question. And this one is simple. I have a loop declared from 1 to 5. I want to add an extra column. Let's say we were at column 4 and I wanted to add a 5th column. I first need to determine if my loop is full. This is again to avoid the crashing, but I'm now, because I'm adding an extra column at the end, I'm now using that index for my columns. So I have 5 columns. I need to test if that array has been filled already, else I will exit and show a message here for them. So to add an extra column, I've used the example of using a variable to keep track of my number of columns. But let's say the question said there's 4 columns and add a 5th one. You'll just put 5. You will just replace this one here with 5. Now, in our scenario, we have our learners stored in rows. So since we're not adding a learner, so we don't need input from the user for a new learner's name. We're adding only columns. So each learner now gets new marks for that specific column. So let's say there was it wasn't term 1, 2, 3, 4. It was, let's say, mark 1, 2, 3, 4. We are adding mark 5, and each learner needs to receive their mark in that two-dimensional array in row 5 for the 5th mark. So I don't need to loop through my columns in this instance. I'm going to keep the column counter as I count C, or if it's hard code, this here will stay 5. And I'm looping through each learner here and starting at row 1 and then column 5, and I'm adding the mark using input from the user for an input box. This could also be a random numbers allocated to the learners. Okay, so I can, again, just reminder, you can use the learner's name in your input box as well, because it's stored in array name iRow and you're looping through your rows. So it's as simple as that. Loop through all your rows and now have iRow and then keeping that columns the same. And now I have my fifth column. I can use my display procedure if it was making use of count C. If I use my display procedure, it will now show the fifth column because I increased my column counter. You could possibly be asked now to just output here. If this was not needed, but you used hardcode 5, you'll just go for I row is 1 to I count R, and then you will loop in your columns from 1 to 5. Now, very important, I haven't said this before because you didn't know enough about two-dimensional arrays. In an exam, a lot of learners try to do things like, let's say, insert or calculations using their string grid. And then they lose all those marks. So a requirement for you, it does not necessarily have the wording in there, but if any changes are to be made, you must make those changes to your two-dimensional array. So you can't decide, oh, you know what, it's very easy. All I'll do is I'll display in the string grid this extra column, and I don't update my two-dimensional array. You are going to lose a lot of marks because the marks are allocated for adding values or doing calculations using your two-dimensional array and not your string grid. Your string grid is used like a rich edit. So we use rich edits only for displaying. We don't use our rich edits to do any calculations, writing to a text file or anything else. Our rich edits are there to display. And the same goes for two-dimensional arrays. When you are for string grids. So string grids are used only to display. There was 1 or 2 instances in a final exam, or I think it might have been a supplementary. I can't remember exactly the question, but where you had to use the label in the string grid to display something. So if there is nothing available in an array, 1 or 2-dimensional array, for you to use, the only value exists in the string grid, yes, then use your string grid. But the marks are allocated for making changes to your arrays and not to your string grids. The string grids only for displaying. And I'm just going to remind you, you should go back to our lesson where we were displaying our data in string grids. It was right at the beginning of two-dimensional arrays. Once I've deleted an array and I displayed again without clearing my string grid, you're still going to see that last line. You need to first clear your string grid and then only display, because that often confuses you guys because you actually have made the change in the two-dimensional array. Your problem is that it still sits in your two-dimensional array with your first display. You've deleted it from the two-dimensional array. It's there in your string grid still as this previous display, even though you're displaying again. Remember, if you're deleting a row, you now have let's say you had 20 rows, you now have 19. 20 is still displaying in your string grid unless you clear the whole string grid. So that is just a little hint that has often confused people. Okay, now we get to the harder one, and we want to insert a specific column. So we want to add column 2 in this instance. Again, that could be input from the user. We know we are inserting a column. So our for loop, we start with a for loop for the column. So we have for loop icol is, again, we're making space. So we're starting at the end of this, the last column down to the position where we want to insert a new column, so that we're making space in column 2 for the new column to be inserted into. Remember, before this, you will still test if there is space for this new column. And what I'm doing here, remember, my rows are staying the same. I'm not adding a new person. I don't need input from the user for a new name. The names are staying the same. They just have another mark, for example. I'm looping through all my learners, and I'm taking the column I'm in. So let's say we were at column 19. I'm taking column 19, and I'm placing it in column 20, which currently was empty. So I placed column 19 in 20 for everyone in all the rows. So all my rows 1 to 19, they are all replaced now. I think I wish I had my own rewind button, but I think I made a mistake saying we had 20 columns. Okay, so let's take a better example. Let's say we had 4 columns. We had 20 learners. So we had 4 columns here. I'm starting at column 4 and I'm putting it in column 5 for all the marks stored in the rows 1 to 20. I think that makes more sense explaining it that way. So now I am going down 2. So that means I was at column 4. My column counter will then change to 3, and I'm putting 3 over 4. So after the loop executed here, if we wanted to insert a new value in column 2, I now have column 2 and 3 having the same values. So I have made space by moving all of these guys 1 up, and then allowing the input here for this term 2. So I can replace all these values after this code with new values. What you need to take note of in an exam is the headings here, because previously we had term 1 to 4, but now our headings have changed, and sometimes we even display these headings backwards. So you have to take very careful note of the headings that it's displaying, especially when you're making changes. Screenshots are always very important. How many decimal places are showing? Was there clear? What are the headings? What are the labels? And you need to match those exactly, because not everything is in the wording. Some of the questions are actually in the screenshots without wording added to them. I call them the hidden questions. Okay, so here is an example of me adding in row 2. I'm now adding new marks and an example of adding random numbers. Tell me quickly, what range will this pick from? So 0,101 using random range, what would be the range of values that would be assigned to each person, 1 to 20, in column 2? This is when the teacher was lazy and they didn't want to mark and they just picked random numbers for you. Yes, Mason, 0 to 100. This is a reminder that this here is excluded. So 101 is excluded from random range. So this will pick a random number from 0 to 100. And tell me quickly, in which unit does it sit? What do you need to add to your uses to make use of random range? Other functions in math. Well, there I gave the answer away. Okay, so yes, it's the math one. Other functions is seal, floor, power, all those functions need math at the top. And the other common one that we still need to do, that we sometimes need to add, do you guys know, apart from math? Yes, Ben, you're still writing exams this year. So you guys are in grade 12. Yes, date utils, Morgan. That's why we're having these lessons. And these lessons are available to everyone online. Lessons are going to continue. Joanna, I see you raised your hand. I'm not going to unmute you. You can just type a question there. Exams are continuing. That are for sure. And I have actually confirmed, because at some point I actually asked, can we maybe not do 2D arrays for the final exams? And they said, no, we are doing 2D arrays. Your curriculum is not, you're going to write a normal exam and you're going to listen to these lessons that I do, and you're going to practice the activities that I give you guys. At home? No, man, we're not staying at home for the whole year. Okay, I'm not quite sure about June exams. Prelims I'm sure prelims will happen, and I'm sure final exams will happen. June exams, I'm not 100% sure about. We are still waiting for the department, but I don't think the department can actually make up their mind until we know when we can actually go back to school. So let's see when lockdown ends. In the meanwhile, you guys really need to work hard at home. And that brings me to the end. So we don't know, Mason, whether we're going to write exams in December or January. I'm sure they will try for December. No one knows yet. I don't even think the department has made that decision yet. So I know maybe we might not be waiving the rest of the exams. I don't think it's in your best interest to waive your exam. You have to apply to universities, and universities are going to look for marks. So you guys, all you need to focus on at the moment is watch the videos and practice. Practice as much Delphi as you can. The theory, you guys can actually just self-study. Grade 12, the grade 12 theory is actually very easy. If you've studied hard in grade 11, you will definitely do well. So great. If you haven't studied hard in grade 11 theory, you should go back and start studying it again, because you are writing theory about grade 11 and 12 work. Actually, grade 10 as well, but there's minimum, but that's not covered again in 11 and 12. So this is bringing me to the end. We haven't yet done the sorting. I think we'll do sorting next. We'll do it in our next lesson tomorrow. So what I want to show you guys, I just want to go back to my PowerPoint and show you guys quickly. Oh, now we jumped again to the front. Okay, so these are the handles for the different social media tags. So you guys can search on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook for Africa Teen Gigs. This is also going to be loaded for you guys, this lesson, onto YouTube in their channel called Africa Teen Gigs. So what I want you guys to do, so this is what we've done. We didn't get to sorting. You can now delete rows and columns from two-dimensional array, as well as insert new rows and new columns. So make sure that you study those bits of code. And this is the question I want you guys to go and find. So you're going to go into education.gov.za, click on curriculum, click on National Senior Certificate Exams. You can do all of these other questions. These all contain two-dimensional arrays. The one I want you guys to try yourself, so that maybe it could be, you guys can have more questions when I start explaining this, is question 3 of the final of 2017. So these are all question 3. In these papers, you will find two-dimensional arrays in question 3. In the supplementary 2019, it will be in question 4. And then there's even some that contain two-dimensional array in OOP questions. So that's question 2, supplementary 2016, and the final of 2014. But I want you to try this one. And if you have more time, please do more. The more you practice past papers, the better you'll do. Alt F4 is only keys I got taught. I need to practice more on Delphi. I don't even know what Alt F4 does, or is that ending this session? Okay, so yes, you're going to have to practice a lot. I suggest you start at question 1s, but first do this paper so we can have you guys ask questions where you get stuck. I'm not even sure if, yeah. Okay, so next we are first going to do sorting. And they will then, sorting does not take that long. So then there will be time for us to start with question 3 of the final of 2017. I would like to hear from you guys in the chat, because I've completed the work for you guys for 12 IT for practical. So I would like to know from you guys, what else would you like me to do? My plan is, if I don't get any suggestions, is to start at a final exam, and then we'll do question 1, 2, 3, 4, and work our way through for the next 2 weeks. But if there's anything else that you guys need to revise, or maybe questions that you have, please post it on the chat. we are going to log off in 1 minute. So the database coding using addo tables, is that what you guys are talking about? A question tomorrow regarding the PAT. Yes, what is your question about the PAT? Carl, you can ask me in Teams. I am available for the rest of the day on Teams, so we can have a discussion there. We've done OOP. OOP was our first lesson that's been loaded already. But what we'll do is we'll go through an OOP question as a final exam. So we'll definitely do OOP, the general code revision. That will cover as we do maybe a past paper question 1. Just to explain to you guys which ones, it will remind us of several different rules of case statements. Yes, and we'll do OOP as well, OOP questions. Maybe for those who missed that lesson, you guys need to go back to YouTube and just go and find that first lesson of 12 IT where we covered OOP. I'm trying to think of the date. It feels like it's been forever that we've been doing this. I almost think it was maybe the 1st of April. I think the 1st of April. Yes, addo tables will cover us. Let me do a lesson for you guys on addo tables after this lesson. I think everyone feels SQL we've done. So you can have a look at the last week's lessons, and we'll do some past papers with SQL, but we've done those. But I think everyone needs some help with addo tables, because there are certain things you're not allowed to use, like, for example, .filter, sort, and locate in an exam. And we just need to make sure that you guys understand how to do those. Okay, so this is it for tomorrow, for today. I will see you same time tomorrow. We'll please start with that final 2017 question 3. And tomorrow we will continue then just sorting, and I'll see you the same time. Links are staying the same for the whole week, as well as the time. So keep your schedule open, and I hope to see you soon tomorrow. Pleasure, guys.